the NCAA president, Mark Emmert's statement today. It was essentially like, we are upset and we are going to sit down and talk about it and figure this thing out. Okay, that essentially was his statement. So is it possible that schools, seeing that what was reported today, are talking right now to coaches and compliance officers and saying, we've got to sit kids down just in case, to avoid any issues of vacated wins going into a tournament? Is it possible we're going to see that over the next several weeks, Gabe?
I think it's already happening. I think as this stuff started to leak out, anyone who had any connection to any of these agents or any of the executives at Adidas were taking a long, hard look at what had gone on in their institution. And whether they knew about it at the time or not, virtually every compliance office in this country, I have to imagine, was doing these types of investigations. Now there are certainly brighter red flags that particular schools have been named. But yes, certainly the big issue is if your player is ineligible, if you have a current player who is ineligible because they received an improper benefit and they play during the tournament, that any potential wins could be vacated. Yeah, I mean, all these compliance officers certainly taking a very long, hard look, talking to their coaches, figure out what do we need to do, how quickly do we need to do it, and what evidence can we gather. And it's really hard when you have schools all across the country who look at this and say, well, I don't want to be first. I don't want to be the first one to declare my player ineligible. And so it's dangerous to have a coordinated effort, but I think there has to be some discussion, whether it's at the conference level or at some other level, to see what are the expectations on the schools now, given that the tournament is right around the corner, and is the expectation that these players, that these schools, as they're otherwise normally required to do, will self-report and will sit down players if they believe there's evidence that they received improper benefits.
Well, I mean, because there are some current players that are being named in this thing right now. Current players, current programs that we're expecting to see in Sweet 16s, Gabe. I mean, So
I mean,
what happens?
Your beloved Michigan is not there, but Michigan State is on the list. Kentucky's on the list. Duke is on the list.
Well, but that's from some of them are from past players. But I mean, when Miles Bridges, again, of Michigan State, is his mom, according to expense reports, received hundreds of dollars in advances right now. Is it entirely possible that Michigan State sits there and goes, Bridges, you've got to sit right now, starting immediately?
In theory, what should happen is the school would do an investigation now that they have this information. If they get enough evidence that he did, in fact, get that money, then yes. I mean, what they would do is they would talk to the NCAA and say, what should we do in this situation with this information? Given that this is multiple schools with players, current players, and as you said, they're high-profile schools with some expectations they'll advance far in the tournament. I don't know that this is a situation where they want the schools to have to make these decisions on their own, that they're going to have to receive guidance from the NCAA. And as you mentioned, Mark Emmert saying, look, this is horrible. Let's sit down and look at it and talk about it and then maybe act in a few years. That doesn't help now. These schools need to know what they are supposed to be doing right now. What should these compliance officers be doing right now so that they don't unfairly put at risk the rest of the team, the players who did nothing wrong. But also you have to be fair to the school and to these players to say, look, just because we have some ledger from one agent doesn't mean that they are necessarily responsible for that misconduct. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily an NCAA violation. So again, I think they want to take their time, make sure they get it right,
sure,
but also don't put their school at risk.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.